Hello dear learners, and welcome to our third session concerning the teaching of the skills. As we have said last time in the second session, the teaching of the productive skills. Now we are tackling the teaching of the receptive skills. What are the receptive skills? The receptive skills, of course, are the listening skill and the reading skill. These are called the receptive skills. Receptive because we receive, the listener and the reader is going to receive the information in a passage or in a listening in a spoken material. While the other skills which we did earlier, the productive skills, that is speaking and writing, because the learner is going to produce this material, spoken whether written. So in the receptive skills, the most important thing is the authentic materials. The authentic materials, whether the material to be listened to or the material to be read. What do you mean by authentic material? It should be real, genuine, and live material. It is used in everyday life. For example, we should listen and read topics about global warming, the ozone layer. These are authentic and lively topics to be listened to and to be read. How do we teach each of these skills? First, teaching the listening skill. In teaching the listening skill, we should handle the listening activities. What are the listening activities? Handling the listening activities, of course, we have to prepare an authentic material to be listened. It should be clear, not distorted in any way. It should be genuine. It should be authentic, as I said. The recording should be very clear and refined, not to be distorted in any way. The place in which this material is going to be broadcast is going to be a good place. For example, the classroom, the windows should not be broken so that they can be outside distortion to distort the listening material. And the reading also should not be distort the readers in any way if they are reading silently. But now in tackling the listening skills, we should concentrate on how to handle listening activities. So these precautions are very necessary before we start listening. And of course, the teacher must have a purpose for his listening activities. We should take the learners on purpose to listen. Every activity done without purpose should be fruitless or having no results. So there must be a purpose of listening. The teacher, of course, should devise pre-listening questions. The teacher should ask the learners to prepare them for the listening, and it is important and it is necessary to motivate the learners before they listen to do the listening activities. Before they listen to anything, they should be motivated so that they can catch the material that is that they are listening to. Then comes the pre-listening activities. The pre-listening activities, as I said, pre-questions, or a picture should be screened to the learners to deduce some clues for the listening, to direct their attention to the material that they are listening to. So the pre-listening stage is very important. It is the listening stage itself. The pre-listening stage or the pre-listening activities can be considered the listening stage itself. Then comes the first listening. Why the first listening? The first listening, that the learners to listen, each listener is to listen at his normal speed. The faster listeners or the good listeners could listen to the fast material broadcasted, and then the slower learners can catch up and deduce and predict what is going to be and what is said before. So, and Then comes the second listening. The first listening just to prepare the listeners, and the second listening is to catch upon the material that they missed, and then comes the third listening. In the third listening, the learners supposed to learn all the material said in the listening tape or the recorded material. And then after this, the teacher should devise exercise to make the learners produce what they have listened to. This is what's called the production stage. As we said earlier in the first sessions, there is presentation stage, there is practice stage, and production stage. So concerning the listening skill at the production stage, the teacher can devise an exercise to check whether they have mastered the listening exercises or not. The second skill in the receptive skill is reading. How do we teach reading? How do we teach reading? First of all, is reading a skill or a set of skills combined together? Reading, of course, is a combination of skills. We don't read generally in real life the same. We don't read the newspaper like reading a literature book or a novel. We don't read an academic book like any other kind of reading. So we read differently in real life. The different kinds of reading can be like scanning. So one kind of reading is called scanning. In scanning, the reader is reading the whole passage, whether it is short or long, for one piece of information. This is called scanning. So scanning is a kind of reading in which the reader is chasing or running after one piece of information, whether the passage is short or long. The second kind of reading is skimming. In skimming, the reader is to read the whole passage from A to Z, from the very beginning to the very end, to make the gist of the topic. What is it about? So skimming is generally to make a summary, to make a gist for what is being read, whether long or short. The third is being intensive reading. Intensive reading actually is a longer kind of reading. The reader is to live the passage inside himself. What do I mean by to live the passage? The teacher is to read the passage comprehensively, with details, to understand it, to follow it, to criticize it, to see the intention of the writer. The reader should check the intention of the writer. He should go even further to see what is the nationality of this writer, what is his aim, what is his purpose, yes, on writing this passage. So intensive reading is a kind of longer reading, like reading a passage from a newspaper, an article from a newspaper or a magazine lies in 3 or 4 pages. The teacher could ask the learners to read this inside the classroom. Of course, they should read it. It's silent kind of reading. They should read it, just move their eyes. They shouldn't necessarily read every word they come across and detect the meaning of difficult words. They should pick the meaning of difficult words, yes, from the general atmosphere of the passage. And then comes extensive reading. Extensive reading, even it is a longer reading, like reading a novel. It could not be done in one day. So you could read it in series. Reading a literature book or a novel, it could be read in series. It takes a week or so. This could be done outside the classroom. Extensive reading usually is advisable to be done outside the classroom. But if the book is among the syllabus and is examinable or examined, then the teacher should take it in chapters, ask the learners to prepare chapter 1, 2, 3, to read it thoroughly, to criticize it, to make their views or point of views about these chapters. So this can be extensive reading done outside the classroom and extended and checked inside the classroom. The teacher is going, of course, to check whether that Ahmed has read the passage or these 3 chapters, and Ali didn't read these 3 chapters, and why. So extensive reading is usually done outside the classroom. Usually it is done for pleasure. The reader is going to get pleasure from the reading passage. But generally also this reading can be cut into 2 categories: aloud reading and silent reading. Again, we have another division for reading: aloud reading, silent reading. Silent reading usually is done by the learners for comprehension, for checking comprehension questions, while aloud reading usually is done as a model by the teacher. The teacher usually just first read the passage aloud so that the learners can follow his track, check the pronunciation, see the length of the passage, where to stop. All this can be benefited from the aloud reading of the teacher. So the teacher should be an example, set an example for his class by reading aloud, while the silent reading is usually done by the learners. And comprehension reading, okay, also to read like the silent reading, just you move your pen or your finger along the lines and then you understand every word in the passage. What is the role of the teacher during teaching reading? When the teacher asks the learners to do the reading, he should first of all, appointed the time for them. Read this passage in 10 minutes. There should be time limits for the learners. Of course, the class might be of different abilities. There are some faster readers, some slow readers, and some readers in between, could be between the fastest and the slow readers. But still he should appoint the time. He should make time limit for the learners. And then after this time is finished, the teacher should say stop, and then he checks his pupils' understanding of the read passage. He should ask, of course, questions, but before the reading to take place, he should also make pre-reading questions. He should ask 2 or 3 questions just to put them on the track. Why are they reading? The purpose of this reading, the purpose behind reading this reading passage. And after that, he should devise questions to check their understanding of the question. And of course, there must be questions to check the newly taught or pre-taught vocabulary items. Also, as it is in the dialogue, in reading passages, also there is pre-teaching of vocabulary items. The words that makes it difficult for the learners to read the passage thoroughly and to understand it should be taught beforehand. The teacher should teach them following the stages of teaching vocabulary item, as we are going to come later, how to handle the teaching vocabulary item. So the teacher must teach these vocabulary item, not of course every vocabulary item, but some of them, the kind of vocabulary that makes it difficult for them to understand and follow the reading passage. He should explain them for the readers, and he should explain their meaning, and then the readers start to read the reading passage comprehensively and thoroughly to understand what is behind this passage. Of course, they are going to read it critically. And the questions should be varied, whether to check the writer intention, to check the cultural background of the passage. The questions are not necessarily to be direct question to be answered by the learners. There must be indirect questions to be answered indirectly. You should elicit them from the passage itself. You detect them from the passage itself. So not to be prominent, outstanding places that you ask your questions to check their understanding, because there are things behind the lines. The meaning of the passage, what does not always lie on the broad lines or on the words. There is meaning behind the lines. This implied meaning behind the lines is going to be detected, so the reader is going to dig deep to bring up to the surface this meaning of the passage. But if I ask a big question, what is the importance of reading? What is the importance of reading? Do we need reading in real life? Yeah. Reading is needed in real life. But it should be kept to the minimum, because we don't need it in real life well in every situation. For example, someone is addressing the public, can need to read the paper to this public. So here reading is needed in a minimum scope, minimum degree. We don't need it in real life. We don't read it every day. When someone needs to address the public, he should read. Also in prayers, particularly Friday prayers. Now, the Imam is going to make a sermon, for example, if to make it in, this is in Arabic language, but we need it just to make the reading. He should make papers in front of him and to do the reading. So reading here is needed in everyday life. That is why I'm aiming for this question, the importance of reading. We don't all the time getting our class to follow aloud reading. Aloud reading is not needed in everyday life. If it is needed, it should be kept to the minimum. We don't need it at all times. So the teacher must minimize his aloud reading. He should leave room for the learners to practice the learning for themselves, because the reading is intended for these things, either to comprehend the passage, and the learners are gonna to comprehend the passage and not the teacher. So the teacher must leave the learners comprehend the passage. He must learn for themselves. Some methodologists or some educationalists say that most teachers learn for the learners, or learn what learners do, what learners learn. So the teachers must leave the learners, must leave them room, even a wide room, to practice the reading themselves. Well, reading can be done individually, can be done in groups, can be done in pair works. So our coming technique or activity to be traced inside the classroom to do reading, listening, speak or writing could be organizing pair work and group work. The teacher, of course, is a king inside the classroom, and the classroom, of course, is his kingdom. So the teacher could decide which pairs, which kind of pairing to do. How can he cut his class to groups? But there are general indications the teacher can follow as pinpoints to make pair works and group works, or group work activity and pair work activity. First, of course, what governs the teacher to cut pairs and group works? The size of the class. If the class is spacious, he should make the pairs according to the students' abilities. The students are not always the same, and their capabilities are different. Bright students and non-bright students. Of course, the teacher can't make two slower readers or slower speakers in one pair, so they can't benefit from this pairing. And in group work also, it should be mixed abilities, brighters, one in the middle, and slower learners. So the ability of the learners is needed and can govern the way the teacher can cut his classes into pair and group works. Yeah, the size of the class decide into mapping pairs and groups. Why cut into pairs and groups? It is very important to cut into pairs and groups. Well, this facilitates the learning of the language. This leaves room for the learners to practice the language themselves and increase the class time practice of the language. Also, the shy students can practice the language with their colleagues and friends without any stress on them. It increases the classroom time for practice. As I said, this also can be done in pairs and groups, because large classes, it could be time consuming if the teacher tries to point for everyone to do an activity or answer a question. So most activities can be done in pairs and groups. Well, one new view for cutting class into pairs, this is something can be loved at, is that cutting class into pairs not necessarily to be in twos. Pairs can mean, this is very recently done and it's shown fruitful results, that can be done into threes. Pair work can be divided into threes. Each three together can be a pair, although pair it means two. Why? Well, the philosophy behind this is that two of these students might be not on good terms, or just before stepping inside the classroom they quarreled. So the third can be referred to as a referee. Also, there are three views about cutting or divided classes into pairs and group works. Some say each two students or three students sit together as, we call them close pairs, or groups. Those who sit together can be as a group. Some teachers make a combination. Yes, according to their role, they see the different abilities of their students. They make the brightest together with those who are after them, and the weakers. This is mixed abilities in one group. Others cut them randomly, yes, those who sit together. So, which one is the best if we ask ourselves? Close pairs, and those, the combination, and the classification. Well, one teacher is asked by name Dario, she is from Argentina, says that when it comes to group work and pair work, sometimes I let them choose their own group members, but most of the time I try to arrange the group in such a way that we have got mixed abilities with the group so that they help each other. So what this teacher said is that sometimes she leaves it for the learners, sometimes they interfere and decide it for the learners to do the pair work herself. And she has philosophy. The first one to take it at ease. Each one is going to choose his friend, so he can do or she can do the pair work without any stress on her or him. While on the other part, she knows the abilities of her students inside the classroom, and then she interfere and decide for the learners to do the job themselves. Well, till we meet next time, thank you, learners. Thank you, dear learners. I hope that you could read this and this could be beneficial for you, and it simplifies the book for you. We have at least 2 sessions to come to complete this book. Now we are left with these 3 sessions. Thank you very much. Till we meet next time.